Welcome back to part 2 of my Days Gone on PC review. This is a story about scandal, high-speed pursuits, forestry, dumpsters, and animal husbandry. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Well, here we are again in the second and last instalment of my Days Gone review. A solid and highly underrated post-apocalyptical, dumpster camping, petrol thieving, wig splitting simulator. But before you run out and buy this game, and buy it you should, I strongly urge you to loiter long enough to watch the section of this video warning about the data collection spyware that Sony insisted on slipping into this game at launch. It's deactivated easily enough, but you must be aware of it. And you must deactivate it. Special thanks to the viewer who mentioned this in the comments of the first video, and apologies for absent-mindedly consigning this warning to part 2. A poor decision on par with selling a smoker a gallon jug of acetone and then waiting a week before warning them that it's slightly combustible. I'm not sure how to pronounce the viewer's name, but my best guess is Not even kidding. So thank you very much. So let's crack on with this autopsy before this cadaver gets so ripe the neighbours call the police on me. Again, hypothetically. So what's my overall take on Days Gone? Well, it sucked me in and I played it to fucking death for well over a week. I could barely put the damn thing down. So whilst I can veritably gripe about the endless niggles I have with this game, my overall experience was very positive, as Lord Gabe would say. Let's not forget that classic apocalyptical games like Fallout 3 had plenty of little issues too. Pistols that did more damage than rifles, bolt-action rifles that fired 32 caliber pistol rounds. Badly. Lots of great games get significant details wrong and still work. Sam Witwer, who delivered a legendary performance in Battlestar Galactica, gives a superb performance as the game's protagonist. Witwer pretty much slipped under the radar in Battlestar Galactica until he was front and centre in the episodes leading up to, and including, Fragged. You could almost taste the adrenaline and sweat leaking out of the dude's forehead as he had a full-on Section 8 meltdown as a result of his own emotional and psychological short-circuiting. Put it this way, his performance in those episodes was so memorable that as soon as I took a few squints at the character Deacon St. John in this game, I immediately clocked his face, recognised him and felt compelled to go and look this shit up and check. Talking of Deacon St. John, dear fucking lord, who named these characters? It reminds me of low-budget detective movies where the main character always seems to have some reference to a metal in their name. You know, Billy Steele or some cliched shit like that. Deacon St. John? Frankly, sounds like a fucking porno name. In fact, I ran Sam Witwer's name through a porn name generator just to see if Deacon St. John would come up. Rod Axelrod. Woody Manley. Axel Cox, Bjorn Cummings, Dick Strong. So no, it didn't come up. But all the porno names were at least less ridiculous than Deacon St. John. In Days Gone, you can hide in a dumpster. How cool is that? As someone who has sunk an unhealthy amount of time rummaging through dumpsters in a whole pantheon of post-apocalyptical video games, this is a mechanic that, now I have seen it, makes me wonder why nobody thought of it before. It's the apocalypse. Of course you will end up sharting it and hiding in dumpsters. They are big metal boxes with lids you can cinch down from inside. I will probably end up spending most of my nights hiding in dumpsters during the apocalypse. I might even make one my permanent home. And they have the added bonus that since society has collapsed, nobody's going to empty the damn thing whilst you're asleep, so you don't even have to worry about enduring the horror of being rudely awakened as you are lifted up, dumped into the back of a rubbish truck, crushed by a compactor, and then dumped in a landfill site, like so many other hobos that have come before you. And yeah, trash compacted hobos is a real thing. Nobody knows exactly how many homeless people disappear during cold weather because they decided to go for a tactical nap in a dumpster. But it certainly accounts for a certain amount of tramps disappearing every winter. We judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable members, I guess. Well, in the civilised West, we trash compact a few hundred tramps every year. So yeah, I guess our society needs a little work. The tragic implication of all of this, however, is even more sinister for the video game industry, and particularly one rival publisher. Basically, Bend Studios in Oregon can even do dumpsters better than the Division franchise. And the Division is a dumpster diving simulator. That's a fairly sobering thought. Ubisoft should be concerned about that. Days Gone has got a nice little survival vibe going on, even if technically it's not really a survival game. You fix your bike, hunt around for gas, rummage around for scrap and rags to fix shit or fix yourself or make petrol bombs. You scavenge for ammo and stuff you can trade, hunt around for medical supplies and have a little sleep at a nearby bunk down location. I did find some of their design choices a bit odd for this kind of genre. It's essentially a survival-ish game where you don't eat or drink. You just have stamina and health, and you recharge health from medical supplies, and you never suffer a penalty for staying up for days on end. Seriously, why don't you have to drink to survive? There are rivers, puddles, and abandoned toilets everywhere. It would have been easy to introduce. I mean, you can drink from the fucking toilet bowl in Fallout 3, and that's what I call class. In other ways, it's ultra-realistic. For example, you never wash. I never wash, so I can vouch for that authenticity. But yeah, even though the game appeals to the survival crowd, it does have a quite simple and stripped down set of metrics. The bike is essentially a character and companion in the game. It's like the horse mechanics in Red Dead Redemption 2, although your bike requires feeding much more regularly and it doesn't have a functioning scrotum that you can stare at for hours. The binoculars antics felt more authentic in this game. I find mission recon with scopes and binos entirely kind of a contextual affair. What I mean by that is, if you're playing Fallout New Vegas with mods in a survival mode where every bullet counts and you don't want to faceplant into a deathclaw while you're sneaking up on a location, I love scoped recon as a build-up to a mission. But if you're playing Far Cry, why even bother? Feels like fluff. You can recon the base, sure, but chances are you'll fuck up the first or the second stealth takedown, alert the guards, and end up just busting out your heaviest weapon and face-planting into the enemy regardless. In Days Gone, especially early game at least, every bullet counts. On some missions you are taking out enemies in locations with freakers wandering around outside, so you really feel like you want to scope shit out before committing to an assault. So you don't end up arse-pulling half a dozen freakers just as you go around a corner and trip over the 3 dudes you failed to spot earlier immediately just before treading on a man-trap. I have heard some complaints about characterisation, but I quite like the authentic, grumbly and miserable nature of many of the exchanges with other characters. It's the apocalypse. Of course people are going to be short-tempered, ratty, and generally defensive and quick to anger. People get upset now when someone serves them the wrong coffee. Imagine what people will be like when there are no more cafes. Most people get wound up in a 1-hour power outage because they can't watch Netflix or play video games for a whole 60 minutes. Now imagine the lights going out and never coming back on. You're hungry most of the time, life is a constant struggle to survive, and the only entertainment is the camp porno mag, and you have to share it with the whole camp. and you've used it so many times you can recite the stories. In fact, in the apocalypse, it'll probably be worse than that. All the pornos would probably already have been snaffled. So you'd have to settle for some random woman's magazine with an underwear section, or the front of a soap powder box with a particularly attractive woman on the front. The characters in Days Gone are precisely the kind of unstable, bad-tempered, sour personalities that are gonna be completely normal in the apocalypse. So let's not wax too lyrical about character arcs and consistency when most people's arcs are going to be get up, find some leaves to use as toilet paper, try and scavenge a can of beans that hasn't rusted through or blown out, have a little cry, sit on the ground for the rest of the day. They set up the tensions quite well in this game. The day-night cycle affects the lethality and behaviour of the freakers. You generally want to be inside at night unless you really know what you're doing. There are humans to help and humans that will try and shank you for your baseball cap or your sexy soapbox cover. I was going to criticise the spiking difficulty levels. Initially, I kept having complete what the fuck moments, even playing on normal. I'd be pootling along at 14 miles per hour on my motorised bicycle with the egg-sized fuel tank, enjoying the view and soaking up the end of days vibes, and suddenly I would get annihilated before I even knew what the fuck was going on. Sometimes I would get sniped and bum rushed. One time I luckily avoided getting sniped, hit the gas and ran away, only to get my bike shot out from underneath me and then getting bum rushed by a different group of post-collapse creepers from an entirely different ambush just down the road. I've had wolves bite me in the arse, balls and face. On one occasion, simultaneously, I've been crushed, burned, stabbed, shot, bitten and eaten.
I have been stabbed, shot, poisoned, frozen, hung, electrocuted and burned.
Oh, really?
But, just as I was about to bitch and moan about it, I did a bit of research and discovered that this is all a deliberate point being made by the developers. Then studios originally were only going to have one difficulty setting, hard, but eventually rolled with easy, normal and 4 tiers of hard. There are 3 tiers of hardness above hard. They wanted a game where you literally felt like you could die at any moment. And just like the real apocalypse, one moment's inattention and your card will get punched. I'm the guy who sunk thousands of hours into the Fallout games and completed them all on the hardest settings. I played through Fallout New Vegas on the hardest settings with the Project Nevada mod, which makes it even harder. These kinds of games should keep you on edge. So despite my initial shock at the huge spikes in difficulty, I get it. I get it, and I learn to like it. When a game routinely gives you jump scares or raises your pulse, that's a great achievement. Sure, it sucks to suddenly die, but damn, if a game can make you shit your pants, then credit to it. And trust me, when you first encounter your first hordes, if you don't shart your pants, you are either sedated or you've had your adrenaline gland removed. I think Days Gone comes across badly in sensational in-game footage. Prior to playing this game, I thought it was some kind of dumbass horde mode zombie shooter where you fought waves of mutants and ran to ammo piles to restock. This is far from the truth. Publishers are always going to use the most sensational footage to promote a game, but in this instance I really think the game suffers from a bit of a perception problem. Sure, it's got lots of bike riding, combat and excitement, but it's really quite a thoughtful, storied experience. If you want shooting, you will not be disappointed, but make no mistake, Days Gone is a journey and a story, where you incidentally also get some convenient opportunities to mow down lots of idiots. In some specific ways, you could describe some aspects of the game's mechanics as a trap simulator. It's an openish world survival-ish game where you do things, collect stuff, complete quests and improve your character, with one notable addition. The entire world is peppered with traps. Some of them metaphorical, some of them very literal. Not all of them are stationary. Some randomly spawn. Some of them will immediately end your life if you ain't paying attention. I cleared a checkpoint in the evening, just before it was about to get dark, and whilst investigating a tower, I looked down and an entire horde trudged up the hill and settled down just outside by my bike. I was sneaking up on a base, heard the howl of a wolf, then realised it was actually wolves that had smelt me, and through an extreme lack of taste or discerning culinary wisdom, decided I was tasty. I was picking berries in the woods, and out of nowhere a group of Neds ran up behind me with baseball bats. Don't even get me started on the encounters where you notice something suspicious and literally can end up investigating your own way straight into an ambush or trap. It's like trying to play football in a minefield, a sport I would definitely promote. And that is a defining principle of the game, and that's on normal difficulty. You're literally trying to do survival game stuff whilst operating in an environment where you constantly have to watch out for other roaming threats just pootling up behind you and deciding to take a chunk out of you. This game does not respect you as a protagonist. It laughs at you. I was nearly finished clearing a horde nest when some random freaker ran up behind me and tried to bite me on the neck. It had nothing to do with what I was doing. It just wandered into the cave because it was bored, fancied a snack and saw me. Like I said, it's like playing football in a minefield. The game and the metagame is enmeshed here, and frankly I like that, and that's why I will be picking this game up again in the future. Whilst the voice acting is superb, the mocap is superb, and it all gels really well, there were a few issues with how some of this was bolted together. There were occasional moments where NPCs would suddenly burst forth and deliver their pre-recorded soundbites with jarring, almost Tourettic effect. Like they had the wrong direction in the sound booth when they recorded the line, and now, in a moment of relative calm during post-production, the only audio clips they had was the actor shouting the line, or saying it in angry mode.
He bothers you at all? Well, just tell Ricky. He bothers you at all? Well, just tell Ricky.
You can actually imagine the editor desperately searching around for a clip where someone delivered the specific line quietly, not being able to find it and then saying, fuck it, the angry voice will just have to do. On one occasion I was coming up to a nest after Deacon had just enacted a long string of brutal killings like a boss. But then suddenly he practically hyperventilated and shouted about the nest being some bad juju. This kind of didn't make sense in context. Just like when you release 2 hostages, but only one speaks, and he shouts his fucking head off, which should attract every freaker in a mile radius. Then you send him to a nearby camp, and his friend incidentally dematerialises. I don't make video games, I only bitch and whine about them, but I would postulate that maybe, just maybe, mistakes were made during the pre-production stage with the voice recording and quest structure, and these were mistakes that came back to bite them in the arse later. Later, at a point where it simply was not viable to drag everybody back to re-record the dialogue. I'm not finger-wagging or blaming here. Ben Studios haven't made a full-on video title for console or PC for a decade, so retaining that kind of expertise and experience is hard. I'm raising the point because if the voice acting sometimes seems a bit off in the delivery, I think it's a production and not a character or performance issue. I just think on the odd occasion they didn't capture enough range in the sound booth. You know the drill. The actor has to deliver the line in an angry voice, but an experienced director will also get them to deliver the same line in 10 other ways, in case the script gets edited and they need options. So they'll get them to say it again calmly, quietly, in a whisper, shouting, angrily, happily, so they retain options in the future.
Play the fucking objective!
Play the fucking objective.
Play the fucking objective!
It's quite emotional, isn't it, that sequence?
Play the fucking objective!
Similarly, there are a few scripted moments that were out of sync with your story arc. I noticed a couple of occasions where you would bond with someone, increase your trust, start to get super chummy, then later you'd get a quest from them, and it was like they'd suffered a fucking memory wipe and had reverted to your pre-loving levels of hostility. It was like someone had picked up a quest meant for you early game and moved it to mid or late game, and not noticed that the dialogue wouldn't mesh properly now. All I'm going to say is that there's a good reason why when recording dialogue, you should always record a neutral, unemotional delivery at least once for every line, and keep it for later just in case.
Was that too much, maybe?
Hello, old friend. Hello, old friend.
I think it does just need to pace down just a hair.
Hello, old friend. Da 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 da.
Or tell Addie. She's the camp's doctor. You tell her. And she's good. She's got medicine, to clean up those cuts.
Despite the issues with some of the line delivery, the cutscenes are all working as intended, and overall the roughness of some of the dialogue is more snigger-worthy than annoying. How each player engages with the game will differ, but personally, I found myself hooked after I started establishing my routines and upgrading my gear. Once I reached a certain level of competence, I started establishing my own MO for scouting, clearing nests, taking on hordes and doing my daily chores. Gathering materials for Molotovs, crossbow bolts and bandages. Post-apocalyptical shit. There is no denying the fact that mainstream gaming activists, journalists, shit on this game. I believe the PlayStation 4 release averaged something like a 7.1 out of 10. And as a professional game grifter clearly stated in her video, according to the insider compromised review process media, 7 out of 10 is the new 5 out of 10. So technically, the wankhead child Instagram journalist community activists think Days Gone only qualifies as being an average game. I call bullshit on that. Mainstream gaming journalists did this. And then they did this. Players, however, said this. And players also said this. If you ever want evidence that mainstream gaming journalism is more interested in prosecuting a political agenda at the expense of accuracy, fairness, credibility, integrity, honesty and professionalism, well, look no further than this. Both these games are of the same rough genre, released roughly at the same time, and the so-called professional reviews are diametrically opposed to the user reviews in both cases. There are a few mainstream gaming journalists who earn their wages, whether I agree with their views or not. But if the whole of the mainstream gaming journalism industry was consumed by an angry horde of freakers, 9 AM tomorrow, I don't think gamers would be any worse off for it, with a few possible exceptions. According to some reports, apparently Sony has cancelled any plans to make a sequel to Days Gone due to its long development period, its poor reception, and because Sony fucks everything else up, so why not fuck up this brilliant game too? That's actually quite tragic considering the game is loved by the fans, critically well received by people that bought and played it, gets insanely good user reviews, 96% positive on Steam, what the actual fuck. And there is a change.org petition with nearly 120,000 signatures demanding that the sequel gets a green light. So really, Days Gone didn't have a bad reception at all, did it? It had a phenomenal reception. The only bad reception it got was from the shill media, and the kind of wankers that are so preoccupied with social justice that they only bother to play 4 to 5 hours of a game and then bust out some half-baked soundbite based on the tutorial, the first few missions, and the list of authorised talking points. And of course, whatever their editorial directives dictate, based on who's got the biggest advertising budget at the moment. Certainly from what I've seen, Days Gone 2 was killed off as a project by lazy journalists who couldn't really be asked to play long enough to get engaged with and emotionally invested in the game itself. And this position has actually been suggested by Sam Witwer during a Reddit AMA. Frankly, I think he is fucking on point. And I agree totally. We also need to discuss the controversy in the media concerning the accusations of Sony installing keylogging and spyware with this game. Days Gone forces you to agree to data monitoring before you can even play the game. There are 2 tiers of privacy invasion, and you get to pick the least invasive one. A Steam user posted in their Steam review that Days Gone can essentially go fuck itself with a rusty hammer because they are installing pernicious keylogging and spyware on your PC and you have no choice. IGN picked up on this and ran a story, causing many denizens of the internet, myself included, to be up in arms about this alleged invasion of privacy. The keylogging software and file information gathering story is now running in the press like it's gospel. I was going to shit all over Sony and then shit all over Ben Studios because of this situation. But then I noticed another comment on part 1 of this review pointing out one simple factoid. The data protection contract does not actually say the things people are claiming that it's saying. So I went to 21 kilotons fucking science lab and started investigating, and here is what I found. First off, I'm as paranoid as all fuck. I don't just wear tinfoil hats, I promote them as a sexy and liberating lifestyle and fashion choice. Anyway, it's not paranoid if big tech really is trying to control your thoughts. I also don't trust big corporations, and especially not Sony, so you should exercise an abundance of caution and use the following helpful guide to block the game from uploading your data regardless, and before you do anything else. There you go, now you're safe either way. After scratching around further, I also discovered the following. This entire story originates from this single Steam review. IGN and now other allegedly professional news outlets have run with this story, relatively uncritically and without reference to any specific coding evidence, nor even direct quotes from the data collection contract. Ben Studios apparently, and I mean apparently, justified the data collection as part of its anti-cheat policy. However, Days Gone is a single player only, technically offline game, with no multiplayer, and therefore cheating doesn't have meaning here. So if that is the justification, then it's clearly complete bullshit. However, I can't find any first-hand reference to Ben Studios actually saying this. It's just something referenced in the stories about keylogging. And please note, it is literally referenced, it is not directly quoted. Then there is the whole issue of IGN full stop. IGN can be pretty fucking woke, let's face it. They have plenty of video game journalists who could best be described as activists. The person who gave Days Gone a shit review was recently scolding someone on Twitter because they commented that video game developers are increasingly making their female characters more and more masculine and less attractive. Sounds fair enough to me. Her response was basically to insult the person, invoke the spectre of incel, and imply that anyone who held that opinion clearly only has sex with inflatable dolls. Well, that response was subtle and nuanced. Why is it that some people can't disagree with another human being without throwing insults at them? I remember a time before all this ideological fascism where having different opinions was considered healthy. Anyway, IGN has activist journotards. They are quite woke. They fucking worship Last of Us 2. They shit on Days Gone and called it boring. And then they run a scandalous hit piece on Days Gone claiming it's keylogging spyware based on a single Steam user's review. IGN's journalistic integrity and impartiality is very problematic, to say the least. And here is where it gets really murky. This single Steam user review makes claims that are not in the data collection policy. They may have misread the contract, they might be paranoid, they might just be fucking trolling. Having been guilty of all those crimes myself in the past, I make no judgment. I am merely commenting that it's a bit shady that all these bold claims were made and news articles written based on accusations that do not corroborate with the actual written contract. Well, this was the point where I got out my magnifying glass, because I'm a fucking Luddite who doesn't realise you can change the magnification of screenshots on a modern digital home computer, and I set to work analysing the data collection policy. Credit to Ben Studios. The data collection contract is right there on the first screen. They are not hiding it. There is a literal button there, so you can look at it yourself. Many video game publishers make you sign end-user license agreements, which once agreed to, seem to vanish. And it can be a nightmare retrospectively finding a copy of what you agreed to. Well, I could not see anything in the contract with any scope outside of the game. Sure, it monitors your game activity and button presses within the game, but I could not find any reference to reading files, stealing personal data off your PC, or keylogging anything other than your specific keystrokes and interactions in-game whilst it's running. I did find this bit. Security data. Information necessary to detect and investigate malicious, unauthorised or fraudulent activity. This one seems to be the part of the end-user license agreement that is most pernicious, precisely because of its vague, imprecise language and potential for being used for overreaching when collecting data. But that's the worst thing I found. At this juncture, I suddenly realised several critical points. I am not legally qualified to analyse contracts. Contract law is very, very complicated, and there are subtle implications in contracts that go far beyond the literal words on the page. It also occurred to me that I am a fucking cretin, and being incredibly stupid, I should possibly consult a professional. Fortunately for all of us, I'm constantly getting into trouble with the law, so I know tons of lawyers. And since I'm not in prison, I think it's safe to say that they're all very good. So I got on the blower to Richard Hoeg of Hoeg Law. I strongly advise any gamer to subscribe to his channel. Some of you might remember him for his coverage of Ubisoft's new enforced end-user license agreement. He is a lawyer who loves video games and technology. He can look at these things from a legal perspective and see things we can't, thanks to his particular set of skills. Well, his take was this. He always advises caution, and he's glad that gamers are actually reading these contracts. He noted that you can opt out of full data sharing, and he couldn't see anything egregious in the limited data sharing. He thinks the policy is vague in the way most terms and conditions are vague, but he saw no evidence of the more egregious claims. Basically, to put his analysis into more official legalese parlance, everyone is shitting the bed about this stuff, and there isn't any fucking evidence to support it. And that is certainly the way it all appears. There might be more going on here than meets the eye, so be a safety girl and use Windows Firewall to block it. However, if you put a shotgun to my head and force me to declare my opinion on this whole alleged scandal, here's how I would best typify this whole fucking shit show. IGN gave Days Gone a shit review. Random internet guy made a bunch of false claims about the data collection policy. IGN seized on this and ran a big, fat, lazy hit piece without neither the professionalism nor the will to check the fucking facts. They saw another opportunity to put the boot into Days Gone, and they took it. The irony of all this shit is that, unbelievably, it appears that I do more fact-checking and legitimate investigative journalism than IGN, which Further hammers home my point about the redundancy of mainstream video game journalism, I guess. Special thanks to Richard Hoeg and Virtual Legality for their assistance with this issue. I guess that's another one to put on the tab. Go and check out his channel. Gamers are all better off for having him around, keeping an eye on the video game world. But enough of legal issues. Let's discuss something with vastly more cultural significance. Smashing people's skulls in! 21 kilotons quick tips on surviving the freaker apocalypse. Crossbows. I know practically nothing about build guides, perks and optimising your character, but I would merely note that early game, having a crossbow and spending 3 skill points on the following 3 perks certainly paid me dividends. Hawk-eyed. Display plants on the minimap. Thorn in your side, a chance to retrieve bolts fired from your crossbow. Green thumb, gather double amounts of plants when harvesting. The crossbow combined with these 3 skills creates a little economy loop where you will always easily replenish your crossbow bolt supply, be able to craft more mid-mission and gather more weed and magic mushroom to turn in for reputation. Sure, mid to late game, you want to be wailing in with a light machine gun, cutting everything down like Rambo, and the reputation from handing in nettles is small beer compared to doing big missions, but it all helps. Besides, everyone keeps telling me that recycling is good for the environment, and what could be more environmentally friendly than sniping some dickhead in the face with a crossbow whilst nature recycles his body. Incidentally, you get a free crossbow early game. It's a silent, close to medium range sniper weapon, and with these perks, it has self-sustaining ammo. Encampment based trust and credit. You earn trust and credits from both doing major quests and missions, and from turning in bounties and gatherables. How you approach this is up to you, and personally I've found quests pretty much randomly thrown at me without rhyme or reason, but I would humbly offer the following advice. Decide which encampment has the shit you like in the village shop and focus on those guys. I personally held back a little on cashing in bounties and gatherables for the places where I had low credits, so I could always afford a gas up, repairs or ammo in a pinch. You do you, this is just how I did it. But in game, as in life, you can't always be all things to all men. Or ladies. You know the drill. Just keep an eye on your credit levels at each encampment and be mindful that if you start to get low, you can cash in some bounties there, so you can afford a stock up. Micromanage your gas. In days gone, you are a biker of the apocalypse, so don't run out of juice. Your motorbike has a petrol tank around the size of 3 fucking egg cups. However, the amount of petrol in your bike is only as much of a problem as you let it be. If you constantly pick up every jerry can, fill up as you pass gas stations, and top up at every encampment, fuel is a manageable issue. If you say fuck it and fly on fumes, you will get fucked. You will run out of gas and end up having to run down the road, rummaging through every car wreck and shack for a plastic can of the holy motorbike water. Or just wheel your bike home like a 6-year-old on a trike. Also, don't forget that if you need to fast travel halfway across the map to an encampment, look around for a free fuel up point close to your destination. You have to pay for your gas in an encampment. Better to travel 90% of the way, gas up for free, then refuel that 10% of the tank for hard cash money at the encampment. Far more preferable than fast travelling all the way and paying $200 to refuel your empty tank at base camp misery. As the wise man once said, being disciplined is hard work, but being undisciplined and having a shitty time is really hard work too. Basically, micromanaging your petrol tank is a boring shag, but it's much less of a boring shag than running 3 miles home in the middle of the night. Be careful when taking Nero checkpoints. Abandoned Nero checkpoints end up forming part of your infrastructure in the game. You unlock them and end up with a nice little cosy, albeit a little clinical, rest stop to call your very own. It has a supply cabinet for your guns and ammo, a Nero injector to boost a selected stat of your choice, and modest supplies like scrap, gas and rags that respawn periodically. Sure, the bed is a bit piss-stained and there is usually a voice recording of some now assumed dead pilgrim describing some manner of horrific calamity, but who cares about the small details? Besides, piss keeps you warm at night, and since there's nothing else to listen to, why not fall asleep listening to the screams of the dying? Getting the Nero checkpoint into functional order is a relatively straightforward task. Clear the area of hostiles, search around for the conveniently located can of petrol, locate the petrol generator and gas it up. Turn it on and there is no place like fucking home. The one catch, however, is the public address system, which bursts into life the second you activate the generator and turn the power back on. Make certain that you climb up on the roof first and cut down all the speakers before turning on the generator, or the speakers will encourage every hostile in a 500-yard radius to converge on your position. So scout the area carefully first, cut down all the speakers, and watch out for the outliers, or concealed speakers that might need to be shot down. Follow the wires and see where they lead. Sometimes the guard box might have an extra speaker on it. There might be a speaker hidden up a pole obscured by trees. But make sure you get them all before you end up surrounded by a potential horde of freakers. Generally speaking, all the games I review fall into two categories, regardless of their relative merits. Games that I struggle to keep playing so I can finish the review: Wolfenstein Youngblood, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Fallout 70 fuck. And then there are games like Valheim, Red Dead Redemption 2 and Days Gone, where the review is delayed because I just kept playing the damn thing because I was enjoying myself so much. I even started to obsess about my motorbike, and I'm not really a motorbike guy. My point is that I'm not even a biker, and even I started to think, might be nice to get a motorbike, go out on the open road, feel the fresh air in my face and race off to the horizon on my wheels of steel. Obviously, I'm not going to fucking bother. I live in the city. I haven't seen a horizon in over a decade, and if I did get a bike, I would no doubt be T-boned at the first fucking junction by some meth-smoking white van man delivery driver doing an 18-hour shift, and then a double-decker bus would probably drive over my mangled body because he'd jumped the lights, and the cops never enforce the traffic laws on the bus drivers in London. But this game at least sold me on the fantasy idea of becoming a biker. So the game is doing some things seriously right. I'm going to be completely upfront about my position. I don't think Days Gone has got the critical respect that it deserves. I think Days Gone, whilst not being perfect, not being genre-defining, and not being particularly original in as much as it draws on many well-used and familiar mechanics, is nevertheless a damn fine game, with a thoroughly enjoyable story. It's a worthy addition in the pantheon of post-apocalyptic, openish world, survivalish, zombie-esque video games. It's authentic, visceral, realistic, immersive and earthy. It might draw on a lot of tropes from the zombie apocalypse genre in film, TV and video games, but it draws on the good stuff and assembles it well. It's got a decent personal story of humanity which weaves through the current shitty, broken world of suffering, brutality and violence, and this amplifies the message of humanity and its importance, because really this is a story about trying to maintain your humanity in a world that is degenerating into inhumanity. It's a decent, eternal story supported by decent game direction and decent actors, and be grateful for the calibre of actors you get here. I mean, Last of Us 2 got this. Days Gone got this. Now maybe Sam Witwer is spewing the same corpo PR shit that every voice actor does. I'm not a mind reader, so I can't comment on his authenticity. But at least he's humble, he's a decent actor, and he's also actually a real fucking gamer. He also has half an ounce of fucking sense. Days Gone is a game that should sit proudly on your shelf, nestled between Fallout and The Last of Us. A shelf situated well above games such as Far Cry New Dawn and Last of Us 2. Clocking in at £40 at full price on Steam and providing 50 to 100 hours minimum of enjoyment, depending on your playstyle, as long as you remember to activate Windows Firewall so that Sony doesn't steal all your furry porn. Days Gone is an excellent deal and a worthy game. Sure, some of the characters are a bit shouty,
To clean up those cuts. I mean, you don't want to get infected.
but if you can get past that, this is a game where you can get lost in the woods for days. I recommend it. But for now, good luck and happy hunting.
One down.